Lieutenant Colonel Sandy Goin, United States Army, Vietnam. I interviewed Sandy in Frankfort, Kentucky, folks. It was May 31st, 2006. He was 66 years old at the time. He passed away in March of 2018 at the age of 77. So he's gone today too, but his story lives on. 42 years in the Kentucky National Guard. He went into Vietnam. First tour was June of 66 to June of 67. He was a helicopter gunship pilot with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and he flew gunships. His second tour, June of 69 to June of 70, he was a Chinook helicopter pilot with Alpha Company of the 159th Helicopter Company. So 2 tours in Vietnam, a Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, folks, 2 Distinguished Flying Cross medals. Just a decorated hero and a great man, and he tells one of the best stories of Vietnam and his homecoming and what happened to him then. But I was just so blessed to be able to interview him and to share his story with you. He was a first lieutenant in Vietnam, but retired as a lieutenant colonel. So I'm just really happy to share his story. I want to thank Michael and Darlene Zarofsky for making it possible for you to listen and watch Sandy's story. Thank you guys. Hope to see you soon. Thank you for your support of my work, your continued support of my work. Michael, love you, brother, and for your support of our veterans and a love for our country. So we're in troubled times, and you guys are standing there strong with me. So folks, I'd like to encourage you to also sponsor a story or donate to this work. There's information in the video description and in the comment section of the video. Some of you don't know where the video description is. Maybe I ought to take time. It's not difficult. You watch the video up here. Below there is a description of the video, words. And in there is a link to help sponsor this work. In the comment section, you go to comment. The first comment is always mine. There's a link to donate to this project. Folks, this is a labor of love. I probably don't say it enough. It's a labor of love. It's helped and supported by the viewers out here in my YouTube channel. And there's no commercials on these channels. You're not going to find commercials interrupting these stories. That's disrespectful, I believe. So I rely totally on your support, your help. And I want to make a plug for the radio station, Voices of History Radio, coming up on the 1-year anniversary in a few weeks. And I'm hoping some of you are listening to it, but it's an outreach. It's an outreach from this YouTube channel, and it's totally listener supported, 24 hours a day. And I'm hoping to keep it on the air, folks. So I'll just say that. I want to keep it on the air. The operational costs are very, very minimal for a 24-hour-a-day radio station. So I would encourage some of you, if you'd like to help keep that on the air. That's something that I'm trying to get into the hands of our students. Living history in the palm of their hands, free apps to download, Voices of History Radio. And I'm reaching out to truck drivers, John Penn, Chris Jansen up in Canada, and other truck drivers. I'm reaching out to you guys and others. I think it's a perfect fit for people who are at home, commuting. I listen to it all the time for any purpose, mowing the yard, whatever I'm doing. I listen to it out in the garden. I'm listening to it making breakfast, and even taking my showers during the day. I listen to Voice of History Radio. So if you'd like to help keep that on the air, folks, I would like to hear from you. So you would go to LarryCapetto.com. Just go to my website. You can find that in the video description or the comment section of these videos. Go to my website, click on the donate link, and it'll be greatly appreciated. So folks, my heart's full. I'm so grateful that I'm able to serve my God and my country through the lens of my camera. Thank you for all of you supporting this work. It's greatly appreciated. Need to take time to thank you, and I'm just happy to continue my work. So sharing these first-hand accounts of what happened in war and learning a lot about World War II, Korea, Vietnam, even the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan. So I'm just so grateful, like I said, that I can share these stories with you. So thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing these stories, subscribing to this channel, and I'll talk to you again. God bless you.
Okay.
and had a great interview with Larry. Tell me what year were you over in Vietnam?
I was in Vietnam two different times. Went over the first time in June of 1966 and stayed till June of 1967. During that period of time, I was a 173rd Airborne Brigade as a helicopter pilot gunship. I flew with the unit called the Cowboys, and I was the gunships in our unit were called the Falcons, and I was Falcon 8-2 during that period of time. My second tour, I was back in June of '69 and stayed to June to '70, and I was with the 101st Airborne Division, and I flew Chinooks that time. I was an Alpha Company 159th Assault Helicopter Company. We were called the Pachyderms.
Let's talk about your first tour there. You flying the Hueys.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you Kentucky National Guard?
No, I was active duty. I started off in the Kentucky National Guard between my junior and senior year in high school. And after my senior year in high school, I went on active duty, stayed on active duty, and with the thought in mind of always wanting to become a pilot. And while I was on active duty, I went to flight school, and naturally, right after flight school, your next tour of duty was Vietnam.
And your training was where?
I trained, started off my training at Fort Walters, Texas. I had a primary training there. And then I transferred to Fort Rucker, Alabama, and finished up my training there.
And how old are you at this time?
I was 26 years old.
How old are you now?
I'll be 66 next month.
Okay. So on your first tour in Vietnam, you were with the 173rd
Airborne Brigade.
Airborne, okay.
Yes, sir.
And what was your rank?
I was a first lieutenant.
I wonder what Larry was. I forgot to ask him in Vietnam.
I'm going to say probably he was first lieutenant too at the.
Okay. 66, 67, Vietnam. When you first got to Vietnam, what do you remember experiencing as far as getting off the plane and it's like, I'm here? Was it what you thought it was going to be? I mean,
Well, my first tour there, I got off the plane and was met by a helicopter to take me to my unit, and flew me up to the unit, and I was just awed that we flew low level, 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and zigzagged all the way to the unit. We popped up over a line of trees and landed. And I came to find out it was the crew chief doing the flying and not the pilot on that particular mission. Each day was different. With your first tour there, you really didn't know what to expect. Everything was a new experience to you. Today we would go out, we would go on we'd take the gunships out when we'd fly recons. The next day we might fly a combat assault where there could be as many as 100 helicopters, slick helicopters carrying troops, plus another 10 to 20 gunships flying alongside of them at any given time. The next day we might be doing what we called ash and trash. That was just resupply missions, taking equipment in and bringing people out. On occasion we had to go in and help the medevac people and bring the wounded out. And then in some missions we flew civilians, Vietnamese civilians out of an area that we were going to go into and making a combat assault on. So each day was different. Now my next tour over there, with me being now a veteran and understanding, but on my second tour, things did change a little bit, because the mission I had over there the second tour was just resupply, basically, or bringing in artillery pieces or bringing out aircraft that have been shot down or due to maintenance or what have you, and bringing them back for repair.
Well, let's talk about a combat mission in your first tour on a Huey. Just give me a little overview of the Huey, its purpose, which you've already referred to, and then tell me about the crew on a Huey and what the responsibility was.
Okay, on the Huey when I was there, we only had B model, C model, and D model Hueys. The B model was the first gunship that the Army had. They had several different versions of that. One had 4 machine guns on the side and 14 rockets. And then they had the crew chief and the gunner that had a machine gun each, so we had 6 machine guns total. Another one had 48 rockets, and then on the front of it had a 40 millimeter grenade launcher out of it. Now, as far as the crew goes, we had one pilot would be commander, the other one would be the co-pilot, and then we had a gunner, which was his responsibility is to maintain the machine guns and reload them and shoot as we were going in on a combat assault. And the crew chief, he had the same responsibility, but he also had the responsibility of taking care of the aircraft once we returned to base in the evening, making sure that oil levels were proper and everything was ready to fly for the next day. Our typical days over there would start right before light in the morning. We would take off, and normally we would not shut the aircraft down until after dark that same day. So we refueled hot, we armed hot, and when I'm saying that, I'm saying that the aircraft was still running, so we could get off the ground in a moment's notice if we needed to, but we were constantly on the go, so it was...
Take me through a combat assault mission, putting troops on, in flight, coming into an LZ, and what you experienced. So take me on a mission.
Okay, a mission was, I can remember one into what was called LZ Stump. It was quite bad place to go into. What would first happen into an LZ where we were going to land at the landing zone? The artillery would prep the area, and then the gunships, we would go in advance, and we would spray the area with rockets and machine gun fire, the edges to keep Charlie's head down, while the slicks or the troop carriers would come in and drop the troops off. Typically on the troop carrier, the aircraft never stayed on the ground more than we would count 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, we would go. If their troops were off, that was fine. If they weren't off, they jumped off in midair. The longer we stayed on the ground, naturally, the more vulnerable we came to ground fire. And then once they left, and then another flight of 10 aircraft might come back into the same LZ, bringing 60 more troops in, because typically the Huey back then carried 6 combat troops in and plus the crew of 4.
Tell me what it's like coming into an LZ, if it's a hot LZ, and what type of rounds you could be taking on your ship, and did you see other ships at any point in your first tour that were shot down?
Coming into an LZ, a lot of time we would receive small arm fire, what we call small arm fire, AK-47s and such, 30 caliber type. And you could hear them actually passing through the rotor system. You hear the pop, pop, pop sound, and after a period of time, you got to recognize it's the first flight in, being brand new and green. I didn't know what was going on until the pilot in command told me what was going on, and then you could hear on occasion hear the rounds actually hit the aircraft, and of course it would you could hear it going through the aluminum and making the different sounds. Over there we had RPGs, which was a shoulder-fired weapon. Plus we had up to the VSC had 12.7 machine guns, which is a little larger than our 50 caliber machine gun. About the same, but close to it.
Did you see any other ships get shot down at all, or?
Yes, we had, on this LZ Stump, we had 3 helicopters shot down. Now, on that particular mission, I was shot at and hit on several occasions. The aircraft was. Fortunately, nobody in the aircraft was hurt. I was shot down one time, and when you say shot down, it was due to the fact that they hit some mechanical part of the aircraft, like an oil line, and without the oil naturally going into the engine would freeze up. So we auto-rotated into the ground, and another aircraft came in, picked up the crew, and flew us out. We went back, picked up another aircraft to go back to try to complete the mission.
What about any type of medevac opportunities that you had? Can you remember anything where you were called on to take wounded out, and describe the scene to me?
The one time I remembered, it was one of the very few times that we were called out after dark. There was a special forces camp that was being overrun, and they called us out to go in and try to suppress the people coming in, support them as much as we can, and in so doing, and naturally there were people wounded on the ground, and we would land and pick them up and bring them out, because we were right there, and we, to wait for a medevac to be called and have it come up, a few minutes later was not good at that point in time, because there was so much activity going on. It was just, they were close to being overrun, but with the support of the air support they got after dark and what have you, we were able to push them away and save the camp.
Now, you were the chief pilot on the plane, on the aircraft.
I was aircraft commander, what we called them, as aircraft commanders, on my aircraft. Yes, sir.
Do you remember what type of radio transmissions you would say? I mean, how would you talk to each other when you're going into combat?
Well, a typical gun mission, I would say, what we would do is we always flew in pairs, two gunships at a time. I was Falcon 8-2, and then we also had another aircraft, say Falcon 8-1. We would fly as a pair. We had Falcon 8-6 and 8-7, 8-8 and 8-9 were our call sign. Falcon 8-1 was, say, the group commander on that, and then of course we had the Falcon 8-2 as flying pair. And what we would do is, if we were going to go in on a gun run, say, Falcon 8-1 would say Falcon 8-2, 8-1 fire mission. We will fire from east to west, expend 50% of your rounds, left breakout. He would start in on the run, and as he was starting in on the run, then I would follow him in a little later, and I would suppress the fire underneath him. I would be shooting underneath him as he's making his gun run with the rockets and what have you. And then when he would break around, and then he would come back around, and he would do the same thing for me as I was coming in. So we always flew in tandem. So we covered each other the best we could. And when we let troops out on the ground, of course, we would suppress the tree line to keep the Viet Cong, their heads below ground the best we could.
Tell me about the protection you had in the cockpit from incoming rounds.
When I first got over, we had no protection. Our seats were a mesh seat. What we did, there was nothing in the chin bubbles, nothing like they have today to keep the aircraft from being shot down. What we did have a flak vest, and we had a ceramic plate. And the ceramic plate, we call it the chicken plate. So we would put that on, and then we would put the flak vest on over top of it, and then we'd sit in the seat and buckle up. And that's really, then the flight helmets, the first flight helmets we had over there wouldn't stop a BB if you shot them at it, but later on we got what they call APH-5, and it was a ballistic type helmet. So that's the only protection we had.
You didn't have any armor plating?
No armor plating. Later on, the Hueys got the armor plated seats, and with slide up on each side. So the only way you could possibly get hit is from the front of the aircraft. And of course, with the front, there was no protection. You had a very thin layer of aluminum or a very thin layer of plexiglass protecting you.
Isn't it exciting starting up a Huey, getting ready, taking off? I mean, did it get routine, or was it always an excitement about it?
No, because, you know, after a period of time, you knew what missions were routine, and some mission we did day in and day out. We would go and recon the river out by us. We recon for sampans, moving equipment and supplies down the river after dark. We would go do that. So we knew it was sort of a routine day, but most time our missions were needed, and we were scrambled, so to say. We were rushed to go out to a place that was receiving more fire than they could help, and they needed additional help in getting it done. So we would, and all of a sudden the adrenal gland put out a whole lot more, and you rushed the aircraft, you cranked it up, and you got it off the ground as quickly as possible and out, because you knew that on the ground, that where you were going, there were people, there were American soldiers just like yourself, and Vietnamese soldiers. We went out and supported also. But they were on our side, and we needed to do our job the best we could to help protect those people and get them back home safely, like we'd go home every night.
What's this thing about popping smoke in the landing zone? Can you tell me anything about that?
Well, what they would do is they would go in and on the gunships we carried smoke, and we carried also CS grenades. That was two types of grenade. And a lot of times in the landing zone, the infantry on the ground would pop smoke to give us a location where they actually were, so we could fly to that smoke and land near that smoke. And that only not gave us the location where they were, but it also gave us a direction of the way the wind was blowing too, to give us a little bit better idea of which way to come in and land. At the gunships, if we received fire, we would drop smoke. Same receiving fire, we drop smoke, and that way the trail ship could immediately start a gun run on that position and where that smoke was.
And if they popped red smoke, was that the color for a hot LZ? Or?
In some cases it was. Of course, we had red, yellow, and green, and white. What we would do, and we had these different colors just to keep the VC from listening in on our radio conversations and saying, okay, on the ground, you drop red smoke. Well, they might drop red smoke too, because they heard that, and we would go into there instead of. So what we would do is we would let them drop the smoke, and then we would identify the color smoke. I see yellow smoke, roger that, you're clear to come in. So we would go to the yellow smoke. So that cut out that little bit of chance of going to the wrong place at the wrong time.
Sandy, did you lose any friends wounded or killed in Vietnam while you were there, the first tour?
Yes, I did. We lost 10 people out of my unit. We were on a combat assault 1 and 2 of the aircraft ran together and crashed in the air. We had a crew chief that was shot and killed. And then several of my friends had left that unit, gone to other units, and were killed in action.
Boy. Is it like the movies, going into battle like that with the music blaring and, I'm sure it's not, but have you ever seen a movie that got it right, Vietnam?
Well, I think one of the closest movies I've seen is the one We Were Soldiers. I looked at that very closely, and I looked at it from a helicopter standpoint. The helicopters, of course, over the years changed. You know, you're from Alpha model to Bravo model, Charlie model, Delta and H model, and on up. And there were certain little things on each aircraft they changed, and only a pilot would know whether it was a Delta model or an H model. And I looked at that, and it appeared to me, from my standpoint, it was very accurate to include the uniforms they wore. You know,
Do you remember in 1965 when President Johnson ordered the air cavalry to Vietnam? Does that in July? Do you remember that at all, or were you conscious of that?
oh yes, I was on active duty. I was at Fort Hood, Texas during that period of time. Yes.
Did you think you'd be going there soon, or?
Well, at that point in time, I'm sure that everybody knew they were going to go at some point in time, but at that point in time, I was waiting orders to go to flight school. So I knew that once my orders came down to go to flight school, then I would report, and it'd be 9 months later before I actually went, or 10 months.
Why did you want to be a helicopter pilot?
Well, it goes back to my uncle was in the Second World War, and after he got off of the active duty in the Second World War, they had a program that they would let you train you to do other things, and he took pilot lessons. And I can remember when I was a small kid, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, I would walk from downtown Frankfort out to the forks of the Elkhorn. There was an old grass strip out there called Silver Lake Airport. And I would walk that 5 or 6 miles every day just so I could get a chance to go flying. And it just was something. And I had another uncle was a colonel on the Bataan Death March. And sort of I went under their wings. And it just, it thrilled me. And I always wanted to be in the military. And of course, my father was in the military in the Second World War. Of course, he was one of those that, he had 4 kids when the war started, and he went to volunteer, and they turned him down because he was a masonry contractor, and he was doing war work, and they wouldn't take you at that point in time. So he only ended up spending the last 6 months of the war on active duty as a prison guard in Spokane, Washington.
What was the mood of some of the troops that you carried into combat? I mean, were they talkative? Did they feel invincible? Were they scared? I mean, what do you remember? Anything?
Well, taking them into combat, you didn't really have a long period of time to talk to anybody, see anybody. They all seemed to be very, very quiet with their mind put on what they're getting ready to do. I didn't see anybody that said, I'm not going, or I didn't see anybody that just was totally upset. They went and did their jobs like they were trained to do, day in and day out. They could come in out of the field and have to go right back out, and an hour or two later, they didn't cry about it or say much about it. They just, when they did have a chance to relax, they relaxed the best way they could and over there, and sit back and relax and watch movies. We had movies every night back in our base area, and we had bars available. We had all kinds of beer they could get over there, and they had a ration. We had a ration card, and I think on the ration card, well, I remember they would give you they wouldn't give it to you, but you could buy through the PX system over there 2 bottles of whiskey a month and a case of beer or something, but it was rationed. And the ones that drank took part in that.
Did you ever think that some of those young troops might not come back? Did those thoughts ever cross your mind? Or?
Well, they did at time. I'm saying, where I'm taking these people out into harm's way, so to speak, and and I've had to go out and I've had to bring some of them back that were killed, and because I was aircraft there and they had somebody there, and we had to bring them back to turn them into the morgue and get them prepared to come home. Yes.
So you did pick up wounded and dead from the LZs, and who would assist them? Would there be medics with them, or how would they receive their medical care?
Well, each one of the units, when they went to the field, they had a medic assigned to them, or several medics. And the medics would do what they could do to say stop the bleeding or whatever and get them prepared somewhat to be medevaced out, and then they would call for medevac. And the medevac would fly in, pick them up, and take them right directly to the nearest VAC hospital. And there the emergency room people would meet the aircraft, and they would immediately start get them advanced first aid at that time until they could get them in the operating room and immediately operate on them. In some cases, the evac hospitals were overwhelmed with the number of casualties they were getting from different, but they did one fantastic job.
So you were used for medevac at times.
Well,
right on the spot, you weren't really designated. I mean,
we weren't designated as a medevac, but we were there, and something happens. Yes, we're going to go back to the rear anyway to say get more troops or what have you. So we would take them out and take them to the nearest hospital. Of course, we all, the radios we had in the aircraft, we could call the medevac hospital and tell them we were inbound with the wounded, and we would go on in, and they would meet us at the airplane.
What was the most difficult part of that first tour for you as far as being a pilot and maybe some of the missions you encountered? What was the most difficult part that you can remember, or hardest part for you?
I guess like everybody else, the most difficult part of it was being away from my family and waiting for the next letter to come in so you could have something to read or photographs of your kids or what have you coming to you. And then toward the end, we start counting. We had a short timers calendar. We'd start marking off the days and hoping that we would make it to that day, so we knew we were going to get on that Freedom Bird and come home.
Tell me about the camaraderie there is among you pilots.
Well, we have a lot of, we stick together like family. One gentleman that was my roommate over, John Hosa, this was in 1966, and I've seen him every year ever since then. He lives in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we talk about once a week on the phone for a few minutes and rehash things or bring up, did you remember so-and-so doing this or so-and-so doing that and things. And then we try to get together. As a matter of fact, the Kentucky National Guard flew me up to Charlottesville back during the winter, because he's a great artist, and he developed a photograph, 50th anniversary of the Kentucky National Guard getting helicopters. And he did it, and we had a celebration 2 years ago in November. We're getting ready to have one this September for the fixed wing, the 60th anniversary of the National Guard having fixed wing in Kentucky. So we get together, and then we have our reunions. A lot of reunions are once a year. I don't go to many reunions, but I do talk to several of them on the phone. But I can pick up the phone and say, John, I need your help here in Frankfurt right now. And he would immediately get in his car and leave Charlottesville and come to me. And I would do the same for him.
Who were we fighting in Vietnam, and why were we over there?
Well, a lot of people don't understand this. A lot of the American people today don't understand that. But we are over there to suppress communism and give a country a chance to do what they'd like to do, democracy, without somebody telling them what to do. For an example, as an extracurricular activity over there, I worked with Vietnamese Boy Scouts. On what little time off I had, I would work with them. In a communist-held country, one of the first things they do when they come into the country is, one, they get rid of anybody with any kind of knowledge. Professors, school teachers, attorneys, lawyers, well, attorneys and lawyers are the same, but mayors of the town, city councils. You had no rights. You couldn't say, no, I don't want to do this. They didn't want to hear it. And if they decided they didn't like what you did, they just shot you on the spot. They didn't have go through a trial like we do here in the United States and find you guilty of doing something wrong. So we were over there trying to help that country regain its freedom from communism. And
We're fighting the North Vietnamese?
in some cases, we were fighting both the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, or I guess they would call them terrorists today, but they had both the Viet Cong, or the North Vietnamese, would come down using the Ho Chi Minh Trail that moved throughout Vietnam and bring supplies and troops. Now, where I was our first tour, we had more Viet Cong that we fought and not the North Vietnamese. When I moved the second tour up north, not far from the DMZ, then yes, we had more of the North Vietnamese army that we fought, along with the Viet Cong also.
The Viet Cong is made up of guerrilla type troops from all over the country, or just from the north or the south, or both?
Both. They were
Like the rebels?
They were the rebels, yes. They were the bad guys. They didn't like what was going on in Vietnam, so they would, how we have different places all over, like we're fighting today.
How would you distinguish between the South Vietnamese and the Viet Cong?
The only way you could is when they shot at you and you saw them shooting at you. Because like an example, our barber that we had in the unit was a Vietnamese, but he turned out to be a Viet Cong. So he'd come and cut our hair during the day, and at night he'd go out and shoot at us, blow up our aircraft, wherever they needed to do. It was different over there because they didn't have like it's going on now with the terrorists. They didn't go downtown and blow up places. They would blow up American places. They didn't go out and kill a whole lot of their own people just to get at us. Occasionally they did, but not often.
What kind of debriefing would you have after a mission, or what were you thinking about? How'd you get through some of that?
Well, our debriefers would come in and just ask us, if there's anything they thought we could do better or differently than what we did, and most of the debriefings were short and sweet because after a mission you were wore completely out and it's time to sit back and relax a little bit the best you could.
That's my question though. How would you get the stress relief? What would you guys do to unwind?
Well, basically, in our case over there, we did have an officers club right down the end of our hooch area. Our housing was called hooches. We would go down there and we would throw little parties where we sit down there and we could drink, or we could sit down and relax. And at night, like I said, every night the unit had a big plywood billboard type thing. It was a screen, and we showed movies every night, different ones. And then occasionally, in our case over there, we had one of the Playboy bunnies came over, and we got the honor of fly her from base to base to base for a while. While I was there, since we were called the Cowboys, we had Don Meredith, the quarterback from the Dallas Cowboys, came over and spent some time with us. We had, of course, Bob Hope came over several times. We had a chance to go see him cut up with us and sort of relax us the best we can. And we had USO people came by, and donut dollies we called them. They would come and sit with us and talk with us and play cards with us, or help us write a letter if we couldn't write a letter home, and because of wounds or what have you.
Was there a need for or any type of grief counseling for traumatic things that happened, or losing people or anything like that?
Well, we had our chaplains that are close by, and we had any problem like that, we had people we could go to and talk to, and try to bring it out to where it's not sealed up inside of you and turning into a boil. So we made out fairly well, I think.
You know, coming back home, you hear about a lot of Vietnam vets had a hard time adjusting, getting back in society and all that. What do you think some of the reasons were for that? Was there drug usage over there that contributed to that? Was there psychological problems that weren't diagnosed? Did they receive the help they needed? Why were Vietnam vets, some of them, struggling still?
I think the biggest thing that caused us to struggle, personally, we had people that came back with post-stress, and there was a lot of, I don't know if there's hard drugs over there, but there was a lot of marijuana smoking over there. You could see it at night, especially all the way around the perimeter where they had the guards. You could see a little cloud all the way around the base, and you knew right where we were, because there was a lot of them smoking out there, and that's the only way they could come up with relaxing. And then when they got back to the United States, and all of a sudden you walk into an airport, and we had to fly in uniform back and forth, and all of a sudden there's some clown cussing you out for being over killing babies and what have you, and you know it sort of didn't sit well with them. And some people could take it better than others, and like even today, you know. So we had a lot of that going on. But I think overall, they took the best care of us they could over there at the time.
Why do they call it an unpopular war?
Well, because the Vietnamese never attacked us. It was due to communism, and I'm not a politician, and I think, you know, it's just like today. It's an unpopular war we're having today. But, you know, if you look back through history, my gosh, so many things have happened. If we look back just take the Second World War. Germany did not attack us, we attacked them. But in a year's time, there's 218,000 people killed per year in that war, Americans. Korea never attacked us, but we went over there, and because of communism again, to help those people out. And during that one, we killed almost 59,000 troops. In the month of January, just the month of January, in the Rocky War right now, I think there were 39 troops killed in that month. But you know what, you look back in that same month in Detroit, Michigan, there was 35 people murdered just in one town. Now, how many people were murdered in New York, Dallas, Texas, Los Angeles, other towns? And here we are sitting here today, being able to do this, and nobody's going to come in and say, you can't do that. I can make the worst remarks I can about the President of the United States or anybody else, and nobody can do anything about it. I can get in my car this morning and I can drive to Los Angeles, and nobody's going to stop me at each border of each state and say, let me see your passport.
And that's one of my questions you're kind of alluding to, but what does freedom mean to you? I mean, being a veteran of Vietnam and an American citizen, you know, what does freedom mean to you?
Freedom to me means that, you know, what it means to me is the ability to get up in the morning and look forward to a full day without somebody standing over my shoulder telling me what I have to do and what I cannot do. Freedom is being able to come down here and talk to you. Freedom is being able to talk to the World War II veterans and go into the VFWs or the American Legions and talk to comrades that know where I'm coming from, because they had the same they had the same experience I've had in combat and what have you. And yes, some combat was worse than others, but freedom, until you have to live, even, I can think back in 1960 when I was in Germany in the Army. Those people couldn't go from one country to the other without showing an ID card or what have you. They couldn't even, there's a lot of things they couldn't do because it was against the law for them to do that, And here we are in the United States, free to do what we want, say we want, and go where we want with nobody going to say, no, you can't do that. That's freedom.
What about the price of freedom? You saw people wounded and killed. What would you say about the price of freedom?
Anything we do, it costs. And unfortunately, to maintain this ability to do what we do in the United States, there are people willing to get up and sacrifice their life to do that. And this is something it's gone back to day one. People have sacrificed themselves to do what they believe in. And I believe in freedom, and I believe that if they called me back to the Army tomorrow, I would go. I would not hesitate. As a matter of fact, I keep a bag packed at all times just for that reason. Now, I know I'm way over the hill to do it, and I tried to volunteer for Iraq, and they just said, well, maybe you ought to go home and try to support the troops the best way you can while they're there, and I do that the best I can today.
Sandy, what does the American flag mean and represent to you?
Well, the American flag to me means that everything that we've ever from the day one when it was designed to today, it shows the freedom of this country. It shows that we fly it, we respect it, and we have people in the United States that are willing to die for that flag or that country. And the flag means the most to me. I mean, I want to be very, very protective of that flag. I cannot stand to see somebody misusing the flag or throwing it on the ground or burning it without the proper method of doing so. I drive down the road when I see a flag at half-mast and I don't know why it's at half-mast. I want to go and stop and ask them, why do you have the flag at half-mast instead of at full-mast? I've gone and seen flags flying upside down, which I know in the military that is a distress signal. If you flag the flag upside down, that's a distress signal. I want to stop and ask them why.
Have you ever been back to Washington, D.C. and saw the Vietnam Wall?
Yes, I have.
Can you tell me what you experienced and felt the first time you went back there?
I felt a lot of sadness when I went back because I knew at that point in time I walked down the full length of it and I knew there was a friend of mine names on that wall somewhere, and I had to find their names just to see their name on the wall. It's a great tribute to the Vietnam veterans. I just wish the people of America would have woke up and treated the Vietnam veterans like they treat the Iraqi veterans coming back now, which is with a lot more respect.
What about your personal homecoming? Was it good or bad? What happened?
Well, I got home so early in the morning. I flew into California, and of course, there were the people there. Even at 1 o'clock in the morning, they were there at the airport, raising Cain about Vietnam. The signs and what have you, baby killer type thing. And when I got into California early in the morning, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I think I got in and departed right away. At that point in time, my wife was living with her family in Kansas City, and we had people there that were protesting the war, and I never actually had anybody spit on me like some troops did, but I did have people, want to get in my face and call me all kinds of different names and everything. And I just, at that point in time, I was looking forward to going to my family as soon as I could. So I ignored them the best I could. I just put it in deep inside of me and walked off and ignored them as well as they, because they couldn't ignore me. I was proud of what I did, and I will remain proud as long as I'm alive, and I hope my family will remain proud of it. I know my grandson. My grandson's proud of it because he joined the Army. He's looking forward to walking in my footsteps.
Do you think it's important that we remember about what happened in Vietnam?
I think it's important to remember about what all our troops did for us in whatever war it is. But yes, I think because Vietnam seemed to be one of them that were not as popular as others, I said, yes, people need to stand up and understand that.
And what do you think we should remember about Vietnam? What should we remember?
58,000 plus troops that we lost over there, and the effort we put out toward making South Vietnam a non-communist country.
Do you still fly today?
I don't anymore. I've had some, due to a condition I received in Vietnam. I've had open heart surgery, and I've quit flying for right now, but I could fly if I want to spend the money to get my medical back. I miss it.
Are there Hueys? Could I go somewhere and ask for a ride in a Huey as part of my documentary? Do you know if there's anything possible to do like that? Is there a helicopter in Kentucky or anywhere? Or?
The only people that have a Huey here in Kentucky is the state of Kentucky. And it's out at the airfield. And
is it one of the originals or is it a newer one? No,
it was one of the older ones that, it's newer. It probably didn't serve in Vietnam because after 1975 we still received newer Hueys, but then again it could be. I'd have to look at the tail number and look it up to determine whether it was in Vietnam or not.
What are any sights or sounds that bring back Vietnam to you today?
Oh, helicopters flying over the house, landing at the airport. Of course, I've been able to determine the difference what aircraft, what helicopter it is, because I flew so many different ones for the Army in my 42-year career that I can still remember the sounds. It's like a M1 firing or a carbine firing or a 50 caliber machine gun. You can tell the difference in the sound. The sound of the rotor blades coming over the house today. I said, oh, that's an OH-58 or an OH-6 or Black Hawk or what have you.
What would you say to other Vietnam vets out there about talking about their experiences? Because a lot of them don't want to talk. But would you say anything to them, or?
Well, the thing I would think is you need to talk about it. You need to get it out, because there's other people that have had the same experience that you've had, and the more you talk about it, the least anger you build up while it's inside of you. There's things, yes, that happened over there that I didn't want to happen, but it happened. But if you keep them tied up in yourself, you can later on find yourself in the situation you have that post-traumatic stress syndrome. So you need to get it out and talk to other veterans. I know the gentleman back here is a World War II veteran. He can understand where I'm coming from, even though, I was in Vietnam. He wasn't, more than likely. But he understands. And we understand, and we try to help each other the best we can. We'll try to get you to a facility that can help you. I mean, we have homeless veterans here in Kentucky that we try to help what best we can.
Well, how do you feel about doing a salute if I ask you? You up for that?
I will do it.
Just right into the camera there, Sandy. Go ahead. Okay, thank you. All right, good.